She pointed at the patrol car like it was a rusty old Buick parked on her rose bushes. Then she called the tow company, screaming that the officer was trespassing on HOA property. Let that sink in. A woman who once fined my neighbor $200 for planting tulips in the wrong color just tried to tow a police cruiser out of spite. And 5 minutes later, she was in handcuffs, right there on her perfectly manicured lawn. You see, Karen, oh yes, she was a real one, had turned our peaceful little retirement neighborhood into her personal kingdom. She called herself the HOA president, but acted more like a small-town dictator with a vendetta against anyone who didn't follow her arbitrary community standards. Too many cars in the driveway? $100 fine. Holiday wreath still up on January 2nd? Warning letter, mailbox paint peeling? That's a violation of neighborhood charm, whatever that means. But this time, she picked the wrong car, the wrong man, and the wrong fight. Because that police cruiser, it wasn't just any cop's car. It was mine. And she had no idea who I really was. My name's Mike Reynolds. I'm a retired state trooper, 63 years old, spent 32 years on the force, and moved into this quiet little HOA-governed suburb thinking I'd finally get some peace and quiet. I bought my place with key on a corner lot with a wraparound porch and a 2-car garage. I fish, I grill, I mow my own lawn, and I keep to myself. Then came Karen. She was elected HOA president 3 years ago, uncontested, by the way, because no one else wanted the job, and it went straight to her head. Suddenly, we weren't neighbors anymore. We were subjects. She rewrote bylaws, increased fines, and started her own little campaign of control. We couldn't park trucks overnight in our own driveways. She banned non-neutral door colors. She even tried to regulate how tall our lawn grass could grow. 4 inches if you're curious. Now, I don't like trouble, and I've seen worse bullies than Karen in my time. But she kept pushing, and last week she crossed the line. I had parked my off-duty cruiser in front of my own house. She walked right up to it, snapped pictures like she was working for TMZ, and then called a tow company to enforce HOA regulations. Said government vehicles aren't exempt from visual clutter rules. I kid you not, that was the phrase. Thing is, the tow guy refused once he saw the license plates. Karen lost her mind, started yelling about abuse of power, and when I calmly stepped outside, badge in hand, she dialed 911 to report me for impersonating a police officer. That call, best mistake she ever made, because it set off a chain of events that would finally bring the truth to light. You see, I wasn't the only one she'd harassed. Over the past year, she'd levied thousands in fines against seniors on fixed incomes. She manipulated board elections by intimidating the one other candidate into dropping out, and she'd been pocketing administrative fees from vendors under the table. And I had the evidence, emails, recordings, witnesses. I'd kept quiet, waiting for the right moment. And when Karen tried to tow the law off my curb, that moment arrived with flashing red and blues. What happened next? Let's just say justice didn't just knock on her door. It broke out the handcuffs, too. You know that moment when you just want a peaceful retirement, but life hands you a clipboard-wielding tyrant with a fake sense of power? That was my reality 6 weeks after moving in. It started small, subtle, sneaky even. The first letter came in a pale yellow envelope, slipped into my mailbox like a coupon for oil changes. Notice of violation. Article 4, Section 3. 2. Front lawn grass height exceeds the HOA maximum of 4 inches. Please mow immediately to avoid further fines. I walked outside with a tape measure. 3.8 inches. Not even 4. I laughed it off. Figured maybe it was just a warning, a mix-up. Then came the second letter. Violation, inappropriate mailbox color. Now my mailbox was black. Matte black. Bought from Home Depot just like my neighbors. Gary, 2 doors down, but Gary never got a letter. You know why? Because Gary had voted for Karen in the last HOA meeting. I didn't. Karen wasn't just on the HOA board. She was the board. She called herself Madam President in emails and signed every notice with a digital signature that looked suspiciously like a Supreme Court stamp. She even had a parking sign in front of her house that said, reserved for HOA use only. Her kingdom? A quiet suburban cul-de-sac where retirees just wanted to grill hot dogs, play with grandkids, and maybe keep a flag up past Flag Day without getting fined. But Karen had a different vision, a stricter one. She changed HOA bylaws every other month, banned certain flowers from front gardens, said they were aesthetic hazards, told a Vietnam vet to remove his service flag because it violated symmetry guidelines. The kicker? She created her own compliance patrol. Well, that's right. Every Tuesday morning, she'd walk the neighborhood with a clipboard and camera, snapping photos of porches, fences, and cars. We called it Karen's Tuesday Terror. People grumbled, quietly. Bob across the street stopped putting up Halloween decorations. Karen called them distracting. Ellen, a 72-year-old widow, got fined for having an unapproved wind chime. And Charlie? Charlie got a lien put on his house because he installed solar panels without written HOA consent. Folks were scared, and honestly, a little ashamed. They felt powerless because Karen had the bylaws, the votes, and the local code enforcement officer on speed dial. But I noticed something. Her power only worked because no one fought back. Now here's the part Karen didn't know. I'm not just a retired cop. I'm a prepared retired cop. You don't spend 3 decades in law enforcement without learning how to document, observe, and wait for the right moment. I started compiling a file. Every violation letter I received, every photo she took, thank you, neighborhood cameras, every slip-up in the newsletters where she overstepped her legal bounds. I looked up the HOA charter. Turns out Karen wasn't following half of it. No community votes, no financial disclosures, no checks and balances. And the kicker? She'd been collecting administrative processing fees from every landscaper and house painter who worked in the neighborhood. Unofficial, unapproved, totally illegal. But I wasn't ready to go public yet. Not until she gave me the kind of leverage no HOA president could walk away from. And she did. Oh boy, she did. One evening, I had a couple of retired troopers over for dinner, guys I used to serve with. We parked one cruiser in front of the house for old time's sake. It had decals, sure, but it was legally registered and street parked. Nothing in the HOA rules forbade it. But Karen saw it, and she blew a gasket. The next morning, I found a neon orange sticker slapped across the windshield. Vehicle in violation, immediate towing imminent. She'd crossed a line. Not just with me, but with the law. Good question. Simple answer, fear and fatigue. The HOA board was made up of people she personally handpicked or pressured. Most were in their 70s. Some had health issues. One was her cousin. Whenever someone tried to bring up concerns at a community meeting, she'd shut them down with legal-sounding jargon and veiled threats. That's not on today's agenda. I'll have to escalate this to legal. You wouldn't want to violate the code, would you? And when all else failed, she guilt-tripped. I just want what's best for the neighborhood. Yeah, right. But here's the funny part about petty tyrants. They always go too far. A month before the cruiser incident, she fined a man named Dennis for excessive front yard sitting. That's not a joke. He liked to read on his porch with a cigar. She said it lowered property values. Dennis sued. Small claims court. 1.800. But Karen paid with HOA funds. That's when I realized she wasn't just controlling, she was misappropriating. She was a lawsuit waiting to happen, and all I needed was one more shove. You already know the basics. Karen tried to tow a cop car. My cop car. She didn't bother checking the plates, didn't ask questions, didn't even recognize me in uniform when I came out to explain. She shouted about visual uniformity. She said she had every right to enforce HOA rules without interference. And when the towing guy hesitated, she threatened him with fines. By the time she called 911 to report a fake officer, I was already recording. And the moment she heard, "This is Officer Mike Reynolds, badge number 4471, formerly with the State Highway Patrol," the look on her face, priceless. You know, when someone crosses a line, you expect they'll step back, reassess, maybe even apologize. Not Karen. After the whole police car fiasco, you'd think she'd cool off, lay low, but not our HOA president. Instead, she doubled down with a vengeance. I guess trying to tow a patrol vehicle and getting corrected by a retired cop in front of her little HOA minions bruised her pride more than she could handle. And in typical Karen fashion, when her ego got bruised, the rest of us paid for it. 2 days after the cruiser incident, the entire neighborhood woke up to a brand new 17-page HOA compliance bulletin. I'm not joking. 17 full pages of new infractions. Karen called it the Community Order Initiative. It banned flags of any kind, yes, including the stars and stripes, all front porch seating, unless in HOA-approved materials, garage doors left open more than 4 minutes. Dogs over 30 pounds, even if you already owned one. It introduced a $50 fine for every repeated offense, which could include having visible tools in your garage, wheelbarrows leaning on the side of the house, Christmas lights up after December 30th. People were stunned. "She can't do this," said Linda, a 68-year-old widow who got a warning for keeping a bench on her porch. "She can. She's citing Article 9B of the amended code," I said, thumbing through the documents she never legally filed. You see, Karen didn't care what was legal, only what she could get away with. And the scary part? Most people just went along with it, afraid to rock the boat. But then, she rocked it herself. Too hard. Dennis. Remember him? The guy who liked to smoke cigars on his porch and read old spy novels? He was also a disabled Vietnam veteran, with a mild heart condition and a portable oxygen unit. Karen had it out for him ever since he took her to small claims court and won. So when his grass grew past the arbitrary 4-inch limit by about half an inch, she pounced. She didn't just fine him, she reported his house to the utility company for excess power draw due to unregistered medical equipment. She claimed he was abusing the neighborhood's energy grid. That's not just cruel, that's dangerous. Later that week, Dennis called me, whispered, almost embarrassed, "Mike, I just lost power." His oxygen machine ran on a backup battery. He was fine, but only barely. I drove over. The breaker outside had been flipped. Guess who's the only person with keys to the external panel locks? Yep, Karen. I filed a report that same night. That was the moment the curtain started to rip. Word got out. Dennis told a few neighbors who told a few more. By the next community meeting, we had a dozen people asking tough questions about the money, the rules, the legality. Karen, in all her arrogance, responded with this gem. "If you don't like the rules, you're welcome to move." Wrong answer, Karen. That night, someone launched a Facebook group called Take Back Our Neighborhood. Within 48 hours, half the residents had joined. They shared HOA letters, fines, shady contractor deals, and, my favorite, a spreadsheet of every financial record Karen had refused to disclose. I sent that spreadsheet to my lawyer friend, who flagged 3 lines as possible embezzlement. Now we had fuel, but we needed fire. I went full detective mode. Recorded the HOA meeting where Karen denied residents the right to speak. Again, illegal under state HOA law. Collected statements from 5 residents who said they'd been intimidated by Karen dug into the towing incident. Turns out Karen had used HOA funds to prepay for the tow without board approval. Meanwhile, I had quiet conversations with a couple of board members. One of them, Mr. Howard, 74, sweet man, was clearly uncomfortable. He'd voted for all of Karen's policies, but only because she told him it was standard procedure. He agreed to help. He gave me a USB drive with old meeting recordings and emails. That USB, goldmine. Just when you think she couldn't get worse, she found a shovel and dug. We had a mild storm forecast one Thursday, nothing major, but power outages are common here. So I fired up my generator, not loud, not smoky, fully legal. Karen showed up with 2 community volunteers, clipboard in hand, and told me it violated noise ordinances and air quality codes. "It's under 60 decibels, I said, showing her the manual. "Quieter than your leaf blower." She handed me a $200 fine. I handed her a warning. "You're tampering with the wrong guy." She smirked. "You're not a cop anymore, Mike." "Maybe, but I still know how to build a case." We called for a special HOA hearing. Legally, with enough signatures, we could force one. We got them. Over 70% of the neighborhood. The meeting was packed. Karen sat at the front, chin up like a queen defending her throne. And then I hit play. A projection screen lit up. Emails from Karen discussing creative ways to process admin fees. Clips of her shutting down community votes. A log of fines never recorded in financial disclosures. Photos of her and her nephew installing approved roofing without a permit on 3 houses she flipped on the side. Then came the final blow, security cam footage of her walking to Dennis's breaker box and flipping the switch. Gasps. A few people even stood up. Karen's face? Pale as drywall. If you've ever watched a wounded predator lash out, you know what comes next. Karen didn't take her public humiliation well. After the community meeting where we aired her greatest hits, embezzlement, harassment, power cutting, you'd think she'd resign, maybe issue an apology. But this is Hoa Karen we're talking about. She didn't step down, she lawyered up. 1 week later, I got a certified letter at my door. Karen was suing me for defamation. She claimed I had tarnished her reputation as a community leader, illegally obtained private HOA records, publicly humiliated her with falsified documents. I stood on my porch and laughed out loud, not because I wasn't concerned, lawsuits are serious business, but because I'd been ready for this since day one. I already had signed affidavits from 6 neighbors, the HOA bylaws proving everything I did was within our rights, and most importantly, 3 lawyers living on my street, all of whom Karen had fined at least once. They offered to represent me pro bono. Said it was about time someone brought her down legally. One of them even brought wine. But the lawsuit? That wasn't the twist. The twist came when I dug into Karen's own legal history. My lawyer friend Tom did a public records check and found 2 prior civil complaints in different counties, both involving HOA leadership. One dismissed for lack of merit. One settled quietly with a non-disclosure agreement. Turns out Karen had been HOA president in 2 other neighborhoods, both of which mysteriously dissolved their boards after her tenure. But the best part? In the second case, she'd been warned by a judge to cease HOA-related financial activity without oversight. That was a court order. And she'd violated it right here in our neighborhood. While prepping for court, I filed a motion to subpoena HOA financial records for the last 3 years. Karen fought it, claimed the data was sensitive. But under state HOA law, all members have the right to access board financials. What we found was staggering. Over $18,000 in miscellaneous administrative expenses, $7,000 in payments to a shell company called Civic Harmony Solutions. Guess who was listed as the managing agent? Yup, Karen's cousin. We brought that to court. The judge took one look at the shell company paperwork, paused, and said, "Ms. Jenkins, I suggest you contact your own attorney before continuing this complaint." Karen turned beet red. Then the judge dismissed her case. See, a dismissed lawsuit was just one part of justice. Karen still had the HOA title, the clipboard, the keys to the community center. So we turned to Article 6, Section 2 of the HOA bylaws. Any board member may be removed by a majority vote of HOA members at a special election. And oh boy, did we organize. We printed flyers, knocked on doors, ran a mini campaign titled Take Back the Block. We got over 80% of the neighborhood on board. And when the special vote happened, Karen lost, unanimously. Even her cousin abstained. We held a formal meeting to hand over power. Karen showed up in full pearls and blazer mode, trying to act like she was still in charge. She sat at the front table with her arms crossed, surrounded by her dwindling supporters. 2 at most. I took the microphone. "You called this your neighborhood, Karen, but it's not. It's ours. You didn't protect us. You fined us, threatened us, lied to us, and now we're done." The crowd erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Where's the tow truck now, Karen?" Even I had to smile at that one. The new board, elected fairly this time, went to work immediately. We froze the HOA account for a full audit, rewrote the bylaws to require term limits and member votes on any new rules, created a public transparency site for all spending. But my favorite change? We officially disbanded Compliance Patrol. Karen's Tuesday morning walks of shame? Gone. She moved out 2 months later. Quietly. Rumor is she tried to run for HOA board in a new development 10 miles away. Didn't get a single vote. I'm still here. Same porch, same dog, same lawn chair she once tried to ban. Neighbors wave now. Kids ride bikes again. The flag flies on my front post every day. And that cruiser she tried to tow, it's parked in the driveway with a bumper sticker that says, "Retired, not silent." When Karen moved out, she didn't say goodbye. No flyers, no community note. Not even a passive-aggressive Facebook post, though I'm still convinced she tried to delete a few threads before leaving. She just packed her things, rolled up her "Reserved for HOA Use" sign, and drove off in that little beige SUV like a villain escaping in the final scene. We thought that was the end of it. Turns out it wasn't. A week after the new HOA board took office, we began the long process of sorting through what Karen left behind. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Outdated newsletters, half-used violation slips, an unopened packet of garden gnome bands. Seriously. But then we opened the bottom drawer of the HOA office's gray filing cabinet. The drawer was locked. Classic Karen. We had to get a locksmith. Inside were three things. One, a thick folder labeled confidential complaints, not for distribution. Two, a printed spreadsheet of non-voting members. Three, a manila envelope labeled, in case they turn on me. That last one, we saved it for last. We went through the complaint folder first. It was a gut punch. Inside were over 40 written complaints from residents. Many were never addressed, never responded to, and certainly never brought to the board's attention. One was from Ellen, who'd passed away last year. She wrote, "Karen fined me for weeds in my garden, even though I just finished chemo and couldn't stand long enough to pull them. She said, you should have planned better." Another was from Gary, whose driveway had cracked during a winter storm. Karen fined him for surface damage unsightly to passersby. His letter ended with, "I thought neighbors were supposed to help." Reading them was like flipping through a scrapbook of ignored voices. Some of the newer board members cried. The second document was more shocking. A list of residents Karen had quietly marked as non-voting in her system. Names of people who hadn't attended meetings were considered outspoken, or in one case were just uncooperative on holiday decoration rules. These residents weren't legally disqualified, of course, but Karen had removed their voting privileges on the digital ballot system she ran. So every vote, every bylaw change she pushed through, rigged. We brought this list straight to the lawyer. He shook his head and said, "This woman wasn't just a bad president. She ran this HOA like a personal fiefdom." Finally, we opened the envelope. Inside were screenshots of private Facebook messages from residents, notes on who was planning to run against me, a draft email titled Emergency Board Dissolution Plan, and unbelievably a resignation letter she never sent, dated 2 years ago. She'd written it after the first community pushback, but never submitted it. It ended with, "They don't deserve me, but I'll make them remember me." Talk about a flair for drama. With Karen gone, we had work to do. First order of business, repeal the Karen codes. Out went the porch chair ban, the mailbox color limits, the no wind chimes rule. Yes, they're back, and they sound lovely. Then we hosted an open forum. No time limits, no clipboards. People stood up, cried, laughed, vented. One guy played the harmonica. We didn't stop him. Then something magical happened. Neighbors started helping each other again. Gary fixed Ellen's old fence, even though she was gone. The HOA waived backdated fines for people on fixed incomes. Someone planted a memorial garden for Dennis. And every Friday, we host a porch happy hour. BYOB, BYOC, bring your own chair. No fines. We passed 3 new amendments. All rule changes must be community voted. Term limits. No one can serve more than 2 years in a row. Anonymous complaints are allowed, but must be responded to publicly. And you better believe we now have an independent election monitor every year. Karen taught us a hard lesson, but she also reminded us, you don't protect a neighborhood by controlling it. You protect it by trusting it. I still sit on my porch most mornings, coffee in one hand, dog leash in the other. Folks stop to chat. No more clipboard glances. No more whispered worries about Karen showing up. And every so often, someone new moves in and asks, "Hey, what happened to the last board president?" I just smile and say, let's just say she tried to tow the wrong car. You know, after everything that happened, after the lawsuits, the wheeze, the backroom deals, and yes, the attempted cop car tow, it would have been easy to walk away bitter. But that's not what this story is really about. It's about what happens when power goes unchecked, and how everyday folks like me, like you, like your neighbor who just wants to put up a bird feeder, can take back control when things go too far. Because let me tell you, Karen wasn't the first, and she won't be the last. Homeowners associations were meant to protect the value of our neighborhoods, keep things fair, and make life easier. But when one person or a small group of unchecked people start using those rules as weapons, that's when it all goes sideways. Karen didn't enforce rules. She weaponized them. She didn't want order. She wanted control. And what's worse, she counted on us being too polite, too busy, or too afraid to push back. Here's what I'll tell any neighbor, any board member, any retiree thinking, well, that wouldn't happen here. It absolutely could. So here's your Karen-proof HOA checklist. 1. Read your bylaws. Know what your rights actually are. 2. Go to the meetings. Yes, even the boring ones. 3. Question financial reports. If something seems off, it probably is. 4. Support your neighbors. If they get fined unfairly, don't just whisper. Speak up. 5. Demand transparency. Power in the HOA doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to the community. Because let's face it, a clipboard, a title, and a strong opinion do not make someone the law. Be better than Karen. Lead with empathy. Listen. Remember that not everyone's lawn is perfect for a reason. And for heaven's sake, don't try to tow a police cruiser. I've told you my story. Now I want to hear yours. Have you ever had to deal with a Karen in your neighborhood? Have you seen an HOA get out of control? Or maybe, are you on an HOA board trying to do the right thing? Drop a comment below. Share your story. Hit like if you think community should come before control. And if you know someone fighting a power-hungry HOA, share this video with them. Let's make sure Karen's story becomes a warning, not a repeat.